From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. China's economy is growing slowly after years of strong gains. Some China watchers in the United States say the Chinese economy is stagnating, which means slowing down and not moving. They say stagnation is a real threat unless new reforms can bring big changes to the Chinese system. Some U.S. policymakers want to know how economic stagnation could affect the United States. Matt Salmon of Arizona is a member of the House of Representatives. At a recent congressional hearing, he said China's efforts for development and global influence have alienated partners and allies alike. There are cracks in the foundation, and imbalances remain politically, economically, and militarily. Chinese government numbers show its economy grew at its slowest rate in 24 years in 2014. Its growth rate was under 8%, 2% less than a few years ago. The International Monetary Fund has predicted that China's gross domestic product will grow at a yearly rate of 5.9% over the next 6 years. Derek Scissors is with the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. At the hearing, he said China's economic slowdown is not avoidable. Mr. Scissors said he does not believe the stagnation will lead to an economic collapse. He also added that a slowing economy does not mean China has lost its significance in the world. Jerome Cohen is a professor at New York University. He said many authoritarian governments were able to continue steady economic growth. He said China is no exception. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. World oil prices have dropped by about 30% since June. That has helped many economies around the world. Increased American oil production is one reason for the price change. Jim Crane is an energy expert at the James Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. He says slowing economies in China and Europe have also reduced the demand for oil. In the past, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, would react to decreasing demand by cutting production. The 12 member states often cooperate to influence oil prices around the world. However, Jim Crane says members want to defend their share of the market and are unwilling to make production cuts. This could affect small oil-producing companies in the U.S. Small companies feel the effects of falling prices more sharply. U.S. companies are not alone in feeling pressure. Oil makes up 83% of Nigeria's exports and 70% of the nation's economy. Nigeria's finance minister recently announced measures to make up for lost oil money, including a 6% cut in government spending. India is increasingly dependent on oil imports. Lower oil prices have helped ease high inflation. The government also has moved to cut back fuel subsidies. The move has not affected the price people pay for fuel because of the sharp decrease in oil prices. In places like Houston, Texas, the oil industry is a major employer. Economist Patrick Jankowski says the oversupply will slowly disappear. He says lower prices may make energy company leaders nervous, but most are prepared to deal with it. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. About 500 American companies operating in China say they are making a profit. But top-level officials with the companies say they increasingly feel unwelcome and targeted by the Chinese government. The American Chamber of Commerce in China, known as AmCham China, recently released the survey results of its members. 57% of top-level managers said they feel Chinese officials are concerned about investigating foreign companies. The survey said that nearly half of the officials felt unwelcome doing business in the country. However, most businesses asked said they remain profitable or very profitable. In China, the investigation of foreign companies has become common since President Xi Jinping took power. Chinese officials have examined the operations of Microsoft, Qualcomm, Audi, McDonald's, and other foreign companies. AmCham China represents more than 1,000 U.S. businesses. Its chairman, James Zimmerman, says he does not believe the government is targeting such companies on purpose. The group's representatives often meet with U.S. and Chinese officials. It can be difficult for private companies to operate in China's business environment. China has experienced huge changes since it moved from a planned economy to a more market-driven one. However, the state still has a strong influence, and foreign companies can find it hard to compete against state-owned businesses. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. In May, anti-China protesters in Vietnam caused damage to at least 460 factories owned by foreigners. Thousands of foreign investors fled Vietnam. They feared there would be more riots. But foreign investment has now returned to levels that existed before the protests. The flow of money returned for three main reasons. The government has promised to protect foreign investors. Also, the economy continues to grow. Finally, the cost of manufacturing remains low. Clothing, furniture, and electronics factories have begun operating again in Vietnam. 20 people died in the protests and hundreds were injured. The protesters were angry about China's placement of an oil industry structure in waters that Vietnam claims as its territory. Long-term tensions between the two countries worsened. China and Vietnam fought a border war in 1979. Foreign investment is 17% of Vietnam's economy and 66% of its exports. It provides half of Vietnam's tax income. Ralph Mateus is the owner of a market advising company in Ho Chi Minh City. He says foreign investment has returned because of the government's strong actions. Foreign investors from Japan, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan have entered Vietnam since the government ended investment restrictions in 1987. Their projects have helped support Vietnam's $155 billion economy and have lowered poverty by adding jobs. In July, China moved the oil platform following talks with Vietnam. Before the riots, China was the 7th largest investor in Vietnam. Last year, it invested $2.3 billion into the country. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The United States Senate recently passed a bill called Trade Promotion Authority. Under the measure, Congress can only vote for or against a trade agreement once it has been negotiated. This ability to fast-track such agreements could be important when Congress considers possible free trade deals with other countries. The issue of free trade can fuel a debate about U.S. jobs. Many labor unions and Democratic Party members support a little-known federal program for American workers. It is called the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program. It provides financial assistance to those who lose their job because of increased foreign competition. Conservatives say the program is ineffective and costs too much. But a former steelworker says the program works and should be expanded. Michael Smith worked at the Bethlehem Steel Mill in Sparrows Point, Maryland. The mill was once a major producer of steel. It employed as many as 30,000 people. But it closed in 2012, and Mr. Smith lost his job. He received training, however, through the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, which helped him go back to school. Mr. Smith's experience with the TAA was good. However, Dan Eikenson of the Cato Institute Research Group opposes the $400 million program. He says that for every job lost to trade, 30 jobs are lost for other reasons. Mr. Eikenson says trade creates more winners than losers. Instead of federal aid, he says, manufacturers should retrain displaced workers. In May, the Senate voted to extend the program as part of a fast-track bill to speed pending trade deals with Pacific countries. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The American technology company Google recently set up its first office center, or campus, in East Asia. Google officials want the training center in Seoul, South Korea, to support people who are starting up new internet businesses. They hope this will lead to more Korean high-technology programs in the world market. In return, the company wants more ties to the Korean market. Campus Seoul is in an office building in Seoul's Gangnam neighborhood. It will have 2,000 square meters of open office space for Korean internet entrepreneurs to work. Google's expectations for the campus, however, are much bigger than the relatively small space. The company wants to make it a place for new ideas in Asia. Mary Grove is director of Google for Entrepreneurs. She says that at Campus Seoul, internet program developers will get support, mentoring, possible contacts, and help finding investors. She says the company is providing this supportive environment without cost. South Korea is one of the few countries in the world where Google is not the top internet search engine. The Korean company Naver has a larger market share. Google operates similar centers in London and Tel Aviv, but this is the company's first campus in East Asia. Google says its London campus has helped startup companies create 18,000 new jobs and get over $110 million in investments. Google decided on Seoul because it has some of the fastest internet speeds and many talented, well-educated engineers. The city also has one of the highest percentages of smartphone users in the world. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The recent elections in Greece put politician Alexis Tsipras and his Syriza party in power in the heavily indebted country. Prime Minister Tsipras gained popularity by promising to end austerity policies. Those are measures to shrink the government budget and reduce spending. Mr. Tsipras has said he will renegotiate loans from the European Union and International Monetary Fund. EU finance ministers have suggested giving Greece more time to pay back its loans. However, there is little support for canceling any of the debt. Dionysius Dimitrakopoulos is a political expert at the University of London. He says EU members know that they are not getting the results they wanted from Greece's austerity program. Mr. Tsipras has tried to show that he means to change Greek politics. The new leader's Syriza party joined with the right-wing Independent Greeks Party, to form a ruling coalition in Parliament. Both parties want to change the terms of Greece's loan deal, but they agree on little else. EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker told reporters that EU officials would have to look at the demands of the new Greek government. And German officials have stated that it may be better for Greece to stop using the euro as its currency. However, expert Dionysios Dimitrakopoulos says the cost of Greece leaving the eurozone may be too high. There may be more questions facing EU officials. British Prime Minister David Cameron says he would seek to renegotiate Britain's relationship with the EU if his party wins elections in May. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.